Someone to Watch Over Me is the 19th episode of the second season of Frasier. This is directed by the wonderful James Burrows, and this is a really entertaining episode. As always, there will be spoilers as I discuss various parts of the episode that I really thoroughly enjoyed. My thoughts are pretty much chronological, and it starts off with Roz revealing to Frasier that they've been CB nominated, which is really exciting. And then Frasier gets a phone call when they're down at KCL, and we learn that it's a woman who's been phoning the show a lot. A woman called Kari, and she reveals that she saw Frasier buying the rose that he bought for Roz. And he bought this rose to give to her because he'd assumed they'd get the CB nomination. And when Kari revealed that she'd seen him buy the rose, it took this fan status to a new level. And it made her come across as being like she's stalking him. And Frasier then begins to worry. And she then manages to slip a scarf inside of his briefcase. When he goes home, he opens the briefcase. There's a scarf inside of it. We have some comedy, some really lovely moments actually between Niles and Daphne as they latch onto this idea about loops and what the loops represent, and it's really well done and very funny. Not funny for Frasier though. There's a knock at the door and there are some balloons, and the balloons look brilliant. They're brightly coloured, they're engaging. He thinks they're a congratulation for the CB nomination, but it actually turns out that they're from Kari. And then when he's back at KCL, there is a note in his jacket that sounds very threatening, a note, of course, from Kari. And suddenly things get very dangerous. Roz is also not very happy because she has a spot or a pimple on her nose, and she doesn't want that for the awards. It's a nice enough little subplot that, pads things out a little bit with some silly humour, I guess. Bulldog is pretty funny in this one as well. When Frasier is getting ready to go to the awards, we have Niles and Martin as well. And Daphne. We have a lot of scenes with a lot of the cast in at any one time, which is something that I always really thoroughly enjoy. And Frasier's decided to hire a bodyguard. And there are some sexist remarks when it turns out that the bodyguard is a woman. So I don't completely love all of that, but I'm also not offended by it. I don't take offence to it, but certainly had this not been 1995, I think maybe some of those comments would have been maybe rebutted a little bit differently, or even at all. But this bodyguard is a woman called Cindy, and she's played by Alyson Reed, and she puts some measures in place to help protect Frasier. And when she's out of the room to secure the lift or the elevator, Frasier gets a phone call at his apartment from Kari telling him that she's going to be wearing a red dress. And I thought that was a really clever way to help move the narrative forward, because when we get to the event, to the dinner, we're not just on the lookout for a woman. We know that we should be focusing on characters in red dresses, and there are quite a few characters wearing red dresses. However, they also plant the idea that maybe Cindy is Kari. I never thought that. That's not something that came into my mind. So that was something that I thought was really fascinating. I didn't ever believe it. I didn't think it was the case. But I kind of thought that was an interesting thing to explore and gave it just something a little bit extra to keep us on her toes. But it's actually Martin who identifies Kari, and she's played by Renée Lippin. She's in it very, very briefly. But she's not at all what I was expecting, and her behaviour wasn't what I was expecting. And I think it's not what Frasier had geared himself up for either, as he ends up going down to the parking lot and kind of gets into a bit of a fight. And I think it was the right direction to take the episode. I think had Frasier confronted Kari, or vice versa, it would have been a little bit awkward. I can't envision how that would have played out. Maybe part of me would be curious to find out, but I do think it would just be a bit strange if they did meet. I can't think of a positive way for that interaction to go. And also by Kari meeting Frasier, it would almost condone her behaviour by suggesting that all of these stalking measures led her to meeting him, so it was the right thing for her to do to get what she wanted. So by not having them meet, she didn't get what was ultimately her end goal. And I think that was a pretty good way to take things. And then, of course, we have the final scene at the end where Frasier and Roz have won their CB and they're up on stage presenting it, and neither of them particularly want to be there. It's a really great episode, really great narrative, some really funny moments. One of my other favourite moments that I didn't mention is when Martin, he was telling Frasier he didn't need a bodyguard, he knew how to take a bullet, and Frasier said, and I think I'm getting this right, but apologies if I misremember it, but something to the effect of, that's what your personality needs, another bullet. And it was just a very funny response. And everything else in this was very entertaining, lovely moments between Niles and Daphne, as I said, and a very, very fascinating and unpredictable story. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. Someone to watch over me is a really good episode.